and he called me and he asked me out on a date, and we went out on 2 dates. They were very Parav dates, like neither here nor there. It was, not yes and not no, and then he didn't call back. Yeah, and it didn't work out. So until we kept bumping into each other everywhere. After those first 2 dates, we went to the same train station and
left at the same time every day.
We left at the same time every day, and we would ignore each other. We would see each other in the supermarket, ignore each other. We would see each other in shul, ignore each other. But in my mind, we'd gone out and it didn't work out. So we already gave it a try, and that was the end.
So I'll tell one story. So someone asked me to go to a singles event in Flatbush. So I wanted to get married. And Debbie and David Greenblatt were the speakers. So one of the things he said, maybe you already went out with your shidduch. Look at your list of the people you already went out with. I kept bumping into Amy. So I thought about what he said. I said, okay, maybe we should revisit it.
What were your thoughts?
And I was like, look, we tried this already. We went out. I'm not looking for any more friends.
Amy,
it didn't work out.
Ouch, you were harsh.
I was a little harsh. I was like, thanks for calling. And then he was very persistent. He's like, I think we should try this again.
Wow, that was brave.
Yeah.
That was brave.
And the second time around, I had 3 rules. And I don't know what exactly gave me the confidence to kind of lay it out there, but I knew.
Hello, and welcome back to your favorite podcast, Stories of Hope, featuring this week, Amy and Eric, who have been married for 20 years, who drove in from Passaic, New Jersey. You'll hear a new perspective, new insights, and of course, a heartwarming story filled with divine intervention. Now, before we start, I just want to remind you once again that PZ Deals is your one-stop shop for everything. And every time I look at the app, I just keep thinking, how does anybody not have this? Because not only does it show me the things I want, but it also brings to my attention the things that I need that I've been waiting to go on sale. And suddenly, here it is. Because on the app, when you let them know what you're looking for, they will send you a notification when that item goes on sale. They've really made this app bulletproof, and it's here to just provide you with everything you need. It's so easy. It should be PZ Easy Deals, but they didn't ask me my opinion. So instead, it's just PZ Deals. So download the PZ Deals app, because with PZ Deals, you'll never pay full price again. Hi, I'm Tzipora Grodko, and this is the Stories of Hope podcast. I'm really excited to bring on today Amy and Eric, who have been married for 20 years. And it's such an apropos way to close off the year of Stories of Hope. We're hitting almost 52 episodes. And I think that we started with a lot of different kinds of stories, different kinds of people. And just closing it with a couple like you is just so apropos. And I'm going to leave everyone on a cliffhanger so they could learn why later. So we'll start off with you, Amy. Please tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from.
Okay. So I grew up in New York in a very traditional family. We weren't religious, but my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. We were very traditional. We had strong Jewish identity. And I moved to Boston for college. I went to Boston University. And I studied advertising, and then moved back to New York, where all the big agencies were. And I worked in big advertising agencies on big accounts.
You have to name drop some for us.
Okay, so I worked on Colgate-Palmolive, Merck Propecia. I worked on new business development, which was selling the agency to other, pitching the agency to accounts. And it was great, and it was really amazing. It was great experience, but it was also crazy. I would work till 3 a.m. very regularly. It was an insane life. And I had friends who lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and I would go there to visit them. And it was my vacation, but it was their lifestyle. And when I went to visit, I was like, I need a change. So I'm just going to move down there for a year or two just to make a change. And it's funny, I was living on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. But when I moved to Atlanta, I started getting involved. Someone invited me for a Shabbos meal. I started learning in a women's Torah group, and I became religious in Atlanta through the Atlanta Scholars Colel. And, I was there for a few years, and eventually, they convinced you, or I was convinced that it was time to really take the next step. And I put all my things in storage. I quit my job and I went to seminary at 28.
Whoa.
So yeah, and I was at an amazing place, Sharim College of Jewish Studies for Women in Harnof. I spent 8 months there, and it was amazing and incredible. It gave me a really incredible foundation. I wasn't really ready to leave, but I had a job opportunity. I actually wanted to go back to Atlanta. My Rebbitzin said, nope, you need to get married. You need to go to New York. So I moved back to New York, and the second Shabbos that I was home, I was at a Shabbos meal, and so was Eric. We were at the same meal, and that was the first time we met.
The first time. Okay, so thanks for leaving us on that cliffhanger. And I also wanted to ask you, before we move on to you, Eric, how did your grandparents survive the Holocaust? Because unfortunately, there are so many survivors dying out, and I feel like it's our responsibility to continue to share their legacy.
Yeah, so I was very close with my grandparents. My grandmother actually lived to be 99.
Wow.
She just passed away a few years ago. And she was like an amazing, incredible person. She has her own story, but one of the things that was really amazing was that she did not talk about firsthand her experiences with her children, but she talked about it 2 generations later with her grandchildren, and we became very close. I actually went on March of the Living when I was in high school, and we went together and spoke from her perspective, from my perspective. It was really amazing. My grandfather spoke less about it because, as soon as he started talking about it, my grandmother would get nervous that he was going to get nervous, and she would quiet him down. But they made documentaries, and, they really lost their whole family and rebuilt it. And I think for me, that was a major part of me becoming more religious, because I really clung to the fact that they were persecuted because of this, and they survived and they rebuilt their life. And I felt like that was a big part of my becoming more religious journey.
Beautiful. And was there any specific story that comes to mind that defied the norms of their survival?
I don't know. I think that every story has so many parts to it. I think that my grandmother was really persistent, and she was really determined to survive. She survived with 2 sisters. She had many siblings who did not survive. My grandfather survived with 1 brother. And
they were both in forced labor camps.
My husband's a genealogist, so he knows
they
all the stories.
They weren't in concentration camps per se. Mm-hmm. Obviously, people have a lower survival level.
Yeah.
But they were in being shuttled from one forced labor camp to another. She was a teenager. Her grandmother, it's 14 to.
Right. She had brothers who, right before liberation, they were put in a barn with hay, and they were burned alive. I mean, it was really right close to liberation. And, after the war, she was looking for her brothers, and everyone would meet each other and tell stories. And have you met this person? And do you know this person? And have you seen this person? And she heard this horrible news that they didn't survive. And, you think, how could someone rise up from that and go on to build a family and build a life? But they did. And they, Kanai Nahara she grew huge, from the 2 of them, they have a beautiful family. They have, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and they really left a beautiful legacy.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing. Eric, tell us a little bit about where you're from and what your childhood was like.
Okay, so I grew up in, I guess, different than my wife, a non-traditional family, but that was our tradition. So the typical American Jews that came in the 1880s to America and assimilated, and they, married other Jewish people, but, a Jewish life, without Torah, mitzvah, Shabbos, all the other things that, without Judaism, basically. So I grew up in a place called Newton, Massachusetts, which is outside of Boston. And it's your typical, New England suburb, doctors, lawyers, college professors. My father was a college professor. My mother owned a bookstore. So I had a very academic upbringing. And I really wasn't interested in Judaism at all growing up. Interested in some Jewish things, but, not really. I spent a junior abroad in Paris, France, which is typical for a lot of people. They spend 4 years in college, and the 3rd year, some people go away. So I chose Paris. It was supposed to be like a, exciting year in Europe. And instead, I lived in a dormitory with French people. It was half French people, half Americans. And one day, a French Jew came up to me and it said, "Hey, you're an American Jew." And I was like, "So what? Who cares?" He was a traditional person. He kept kosher. He was an Sephardi Algerian, and he and his friends, they didn't eat in the cafeteria. They ate in their room. They made their own food.
Wow.
And so he said, "Come, join with us. We're going to have lunch." I said, "Okay, for free food, why not?" And that was the beginning, literally, of my Jewish consciousness. He invited me they went to shul Friday night. There was what before World War II was an Ashkenazi shtibel around the corner from us, but it was now a Sephardic synagogue. And the first time, in recent memory that I could remember being in a synagogue, that just one thing led to another. I started reading books about Judaism and the Jews. I wasn't particularly, beforehand I hadn't been interested. Now I said, well, it was sort of on the radar. I went to Israel for the first time. And over the next few years, this is, when I was 19, but over the next few years, I got more and more involved. I started going to service on a regular basis, first Reform, conservative, then Orthodox.
Whoa.
It's a long story. I'm going to get to speak hours about it. But eventually, I ended up at a certain point, started keeping Shabbos. This is 1994. Started, wearing tzitzis. But it was, I had a lot of good mentors along the way. So people who, I wasn't ready to wear yarmulke full time, but they said, well, you can wear tzitzis. No one will know you're wearing tzitzis. It's a mitzvah every, Dalet Amos. I said, okay, I'll wear tzitzis. So I actually started putting on tzitzis before I put on a yarmulke.
I hear that actually. It could feel more comfortable. It's less public.
They said, no, but you're wearing tzitzis. So I said, okay. So one thing, and then eventually they said, you know what, you have really done everything here. I was working as a writer, wanted to be a writer at one point, and they said, but I was more interested as time went on in Yiddishkeit. So they said, you're ready, you have to go to Israel. And I remember I actually called the Chabad rabbi, this is a mass in Wisconsin. I called him over to my apartment and I told him I was going to go to Israel. And he said, Israel is the best thing for you because I always thought he wanted everyone to become a Lubavitcher, but he said, we're alone in my apartment. His first comment was, in Jerusalem, you're going to see the whole spectrum of Judaism, and you're going to find your place in it. And that's what happened. So I went to Israel. Also, part of my having no background was I had no background. So even though I was interested in services and Judaism and Torah, I knew literally no Hebrew. So I did an Ulpan when I was in Israel. I went to different yeshivas, had a cup of coffee here and there, just learning with different rebbeim. It was definitely a transition going from, Shomer Shabbos to, Ben Torah. So that took a while as well. And then, I landed back in America. I was actually here in Monsey at Or Sameach.
No way.
I did several tours of duty here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember Alan Grodko in Or Sameach? Was that your time or no?
I don't know.
Or Steven Safer?
Steven Safer is, I think,
the rock star. He had tattoos.
Yes. In fact, we just
We
spoke about him recently.
Really?
We were there at the same time. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. Maybe he was there at a different time. My dad was also in Or Sameach.
Okay.
And this is, I guess, fun fact off the record for everyone, even though we're on the record. So my dad.
This was 2000, 2002?
Yeah.
2001, 2002?
My husband's very good at dates.
Okay.
He's a historian, so he's very good at dates.
So this was a little bit before that. Yeah, this is around that time. So my dad was in Or Sameach, also a baalei teshuva. And I believe either he had asked a question or Stephen had asked a question and they approached one another. My dad was legally blind and he needed a driver. So Stephen became like his driver. I actually just went to meet Stephen in Savannah, Georgia. I think it was last year. That's where he's living now. We're trying to get him on the podcast, but it's a crazy story too. Rock star marries the first girl in Lakewoods who went to college. Like pretty amazing for another time. But
remember when he got engaged? Yeah,
I grew up with him, like driving me around, and that's my fun little Jewish geography that I just did on here for everybody to hear. But that's beautiful. Nice. Okay, so and then from Monsey, you ended up in the city.
Well, I was in the city. I actually, I don't know, it's a long story, but when I was in Israel, so I thought maybe I'd just spend the rest of my life there. And then my parents visited me. They're married, but they had different schedules. My father visited me. His last visit was in July of 1997. He said, well, I guess I'll see you next year. And then it just sort of struck me, Judaism is this family religion. And as a baalei teshuva, every week I'm going to different families. I'm seeing what Jewish families are like. And it struck me that I'm going to spend the rest of my life away from my family. And I said, that's, I got to do something about that. And so I spoke to my parents and my father said, look, you can move to New York, you could get a job, find a wife, have your Judaism. And so that's what I did. So he was our prophet. That's exactly what happened.
Well, thank you for the backdrop. And Amy, tell us, Amy said the first time she met you, that was the first time she met you in the city at a Shabbos meal?
At a Shabbos meal.
At a Shabbos meal. And tell us from your perspective what happened, because I know that there's a lot of layers to your story.
All right, so I'll just tell one story as a side point. But when I first moved to Washington Heights, so I'm a baalei teshuva. So I went to daven mincha at Breuer's, the big synagogue there. And I'm walking in, I saw a Jew with a black hat, and I just said, Shalom Aleichem, what's your name? He said, I said, my name is Eric. He said, his name is Herschel. We're walking out, and we're walking and talking. And it turns out he's a Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University, Herschel Schechter. But I wouldn't have recognized him because I'm not from that world, so to speak. And we're walking and talking, and he stops in front of 56 Bennett. And he says, there's a lot of girls here. This could be a good place to meet your wife. Fast forward a few years later, that's actually, we met in 56 Bennett.
Oh,
the Shabbos meal was in that building.
That's amazing.
Unbelievable. I mean, just, made a comment, but,
That's amazing. That's
I was
cool.
just back from Israel, and I didn't have a lot of connections in New York because I became religious in Atlanta. But I had a friend that I met in Israel who said, when you come back, I live in Washington Heights, come to me for Shabbos. At the time I was living at home with my parents, and I came for Shabbos, and she called me before and she said, we have this couple that's coming, and, you know them, and they also have this friend, and are you comfortable being at a mixed meal? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I'm back in New York, and there's going to be a couple there. I feel like it was, an appropriate environment. And it was like a late meal in the summer. And it was, Eric was there with a friend, and they, pulled me into the kitchen. They said, what do you think? I said, I don't really see it. He's so quiet. And I don't know. It's not what I imagined, not what I pictured as my type. And they pulled him, aside, and they said, what do you think? And he said, nah, I don't really see it. And, it's just funny that we have these ideas in our head that if it doesn't make sense right away, it's just not it. And then, basically after that, I went with a few friends, we actually came to Muncie, and we went to a few different shidduchim in one day. I never talked about myself so much. And we were pretty exhausted, but two of those people had suggested Eric. And, also because the two of us were baalei teshuva and we were living in Washington Heights, there weren't a lot of baalei teshuva then. We were around the same age. Eric is 6 years older than me. We were around the same age. So everyone was like, oh, have you met this guy, Eric Feinstein? And Eric hosted these big singles meals. He would have 40 people Friday night, 40 people Shabbos day.
Whoa.
So a lot of shidduchim came out of those meals.
Wow.
I'm sure you have a lot of listeners who were like, I was there. I went to a meal. They were pretty famous. And so people just kept suggesting us. And I was like, no, I met him. It's not for me. It's not going to work out. But you can continue. One of those shadchanim. One of those shadchanim kept calling him and was very persistent, leaving him messages like, I have a really good feeling about this.
But we didn't go out.
Right.
So while you were being suggested to Amy on numerous accounts, was the same thing happening to you?
One shadchan called me about her. But then we met in July. And then I think in November, she moved to Washington Heights. And her first Shabbos there, I usually went to Shalosh Shudas in Mount Sinai. And let's be honest, no women ever came to the Shalosh Shudas. It's like an old men's Shalosh Shudas, with herring and it's not, and they had speakers every week. And so her friend said, it was her first Shabbos in Washington Heights, let's go to Shalosh Shudas in Mount Sinai. And
how come?
I don't know.
I have no idea. It's like,
and there were only 2 empty seats, and one of them was next to me. And she sat next to me.
Oh.
And afterwards, I called her friend. I said, I'd like to go out with her, and
asked for my phone number. And my friend told me he asked for my phone number, and I was like, well, shouldn't we go through someone? And then I was like, I guess, I don't know. This is how it's done in New York. I only dated a little bit when I was in Israel, and I was like, okay, I'm in New York. I guess this is how it's done. And he called me and he asked me out on a date, and we went out on 2 dates. They were very par of dates, neither here nor there. It was, not yes and not no. And then he didn't call back. Yeah. And it didn't work out. So until we kept bumping into each other everywhere. After those first 2 dates, we he lived at 66 Overlook and I lived in 10 Overlook. So we went to the same train station and
Left at the same time every
we
day.
would left at the same time every day and we would ignore each other. He would have his, face in a safer and I would be, minding my own business and we just did not talk to each other, but we saw each other every day. We would see each other in the supermarket, ignore each other. We would see each other in shul, ignore each other, but we were in the same
By the way, that
world.
sounds very much like Jewish dating. Oh, I'm going to get dressed, go to this wedding, hope someone sees me. I see him, ignore.
Right.
He sees me, ignore.
But in my mind, we'd gone out and it didn't work out. So
Mhm.
we already gave it a try and that was the end.
Mhm.
So I'll tell one story. So in July, about the same time that we met, someone asked me to go to a singles event in Flatbush. So I went. I wanted to get married. And Debbie and David Greenblatt were the speakers. And they're a wonderful couple. They speak about different topics and give people chizuk. So one of the things he said was that maybe you already went out with your shidduch. Look at your list of the people you already went out with, and maybe you already went out with your beshert and it wasn't right for whatever reason, and you'll revisit it and you'll get married.
Didn't he say cross off anyone who's already been married, cross off anyone that was a definite no, and then look who's left on the list and say, why didn't I go out with them again?
So in July, I thought, I when he told her the story, I looked at my list. I said, okay, I can't think of anything when I want to go out with again. But then when I kept bumping it to Amy, so I thought about what he said. I said, okay, maybe we should revisit it. Maybe we should look at my list again.
And so at this time, how old were you?
I was 34, 35.
And how old
I was
were you?
29.
Okay. And when Eric reached out to go out with you for the second time, what were your thoughts?
So he actually had a Hanukkah party with a lot of people and he called me and invited me. And I had made Shabbos with a bunch of girlfriends that week and I had all these leftover desserts and I brought them. And after the party, he called me and he said, you left your Tupperware here. I said, it's okay. It's a disposable. You can throw it out. And he was like, no, I want to know which sponge I should use. Is it milchik? Is it fleshik? Is it parv? I was like, you could throw it out. And he was kept trying to initiate conversation. And I was like, look, we tried this already. We went out. I'm not looking for any more friends.
Amy,
it didn't work out.
Ouch,
I was
you were harsh.
I was a little harsh. I was like, thanks for calling. And then he was very persistent. He's like, I think we should try this again.
Wow, that was brave.
Yeah.
That was brave.
And the second time around, I had 3 rules. And I don't know what exactly gave me the confidence to kind of lay it out there, but I knew, just to back up for a minute, I knew that the first time we went out, someone had said to me, he gets a lot of suggestions. He's a very open-minded dater. He went out with girls who were divorced. He went out with, women who had kids. He went out with older singles, he was very, mainstream. So he could go out with an FFB. He can go out with a baalei. He was tall. He could go out with tall people. He can go out with short people. He was very open-minded and he was constantly getting suggestions. And someone who knew both of us said to me, be careful. He's not ever really going to get married. He's just dating. And that scared me a little bit. And so the second time around, I said, okay, I'll go out with you with 3 conditions. 1, we need to have an in-between person. It could be anyone you want, but it has to be someone that we're both speaking to. Number 2, you can't hear any other suggestions because the person on the other end of the phone, the person that the shadchan is telling you about always seems better than the person who's right in front of you. They're trying to get you to go out with that person and they say, are you available? And you say, yeah, I'm available. And they tell you all about this wonderful person.
They're perfect.
And they're perfect. And the person who's in front of you, you're evaluating what's wrong with them. Are they going to be a good spouse? So
Yeah.
I said, you have to make sure that you're not hearing any suggestions. And number 3, you really have to give this a try. I don't want to waste my time. I want to know that you're serious. And he said, okay. Done.
Whoa. So I'm going to pause you here for a second because I have so many things coming up. We'll be right back to our episode. But first, as promised, I'm really excited to give Tzedaka in the merit of all those that are watching this episode and hoping it provides them with something. And I'm doing that through my favorite app that's Colel Chabad Pushka App. I'm going to do it with you right here. That simple. I just made my donation. And this money is going to support orphans who are struggling to pay for their weddings. So join me in the mitzvah. Download the Colel Chabad Pushka app and in an easy way, simply change someone else's life and elevate your day through providing blessing by simply pressing a button to give tzedakah.
So you all know I'm a big fan of Raquel Couture, and I'm really excited because my friend is getting married. And in addition to having bridal gowns and wedding gowns, they also have evening dresses. So Raquel Couture caters to anyone. If you're the friend, if you're the bride, if you're the sister or the parent, they are the top industry for bridal wear. They customize, tailor, and have beautiful, unique pieces that are just sitting there, ready for you to try them on. Conveniently located in Brooklyn, New York, and Lakewood, it's just like the best place to go to. And what's super cool is if you mention Stories of Hope, you get 5% off your beautiful piece. So go someplace where quality is not compromised and service is top notch so that you can look as beautiful as you deserve to feel at Raquel Couture. Check them out on Instagram to see their beautiful pieces, and check them out in your local city or drive down there. It'll be worth it to find that perfect piece that you've been looking for.
The first is, what would you respond to that person who says, I don't know if he really wants to get married. He has everything going for him. A lot of people dated him, because I'm sure there are people in this position that maybe look that way. And there's a lot of judgment and there's a lot of noise.
Right.
And what would you have, if you could, what do you wish you could have told that person?
Listen, when I was, I definitely saw a lot of friends get married before me.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, it's not always easy. You have dreams in life. You want to get married, have a family like everyone else. All the families I went to, I wanted to, have the same brachas that they had. But I didn't know what the timetable was. A lot of times it's like being in traffic. The cars in front of you are stopped up, and eventually all of a sudden it just starts moving, and there was no accident or anything. Mm-hmm. Why were you in traffic? I don't know. So I didn't have any, I didn't know what the spiritual reasons were. Why I didn't, I was out with someone once. She was younger than me. So she asked me on the date, why aren't you married? You're such a nice guy. Well, why aren't you married already? So I gave whatever reasons I thought of. So later on in the conversation, she mentioned she has a brother, same age as me, and who's not married. I said, well, so what about him? What's his issue? Well, she said, well, that's different. He hasn't met the right person. I said, oh, okay, come on.
Yeah. I have amazing, extraordinary friends. And someone once called me about one of my friends, and I went on and on about what a beautiful person she is, and his son would be lucky if he got a chance to go out with her. And he said, well, why isn't she married yet? At the time, she was 29. And in my bold and brazen audacity, I said, how old's your son? And he said, 29. I said, how come he's not married yet? And he's like, oh, all right.
It's such an unfair question. It's like it's not in our control always.
It's a question that has so much judgment behind it, and it really destroys everything this person built up to make them feel dignified and proud of who they are. Anyone that's dating is so not pleasant.
Right.
Nobody wants to be doing it. You don't make money while you're doing it. You don't save time. You don't feel better about yourself. You don't feel more loved. You don't feel more wanted. There's so much disappointment. And I'm highlighting this so that anyone that has that judgment can know nobody wants to be in this place unless they admit and say, I love being in this place. And then in that case, I don't know what you're drinking. I don't know what you're on, but it's unusual. It's not the majority.
But I think an important point also is that just because you're getting a lot of suggestions doesn't make it easier, and it doesn't make it more clear. And so you might not get, a lot of suggestions, but you get that one right suggestion. So I think that's important also, that I think sometimes when you have too many choices, it's like used car, shopping. It's like, well, this one or this one has this and this one has this. And it's not like that. You're choosing a spouse. You're not buying a used car.
Yeah. And actually, I have a question for you, Eric, because your wife mentioned that you got a lot of suggestions. Did you find that sometimes it was really hard to give people a chance because you felt like, well, there's always going to be someone else?
No, I think every time I went out, I feel like, I was looking forward to, hopefully this is the one.
Thank you. And I asked that question because it's another myth that people bring up. Like, well, it's funny. The people that are always preaching the quote unquote insight that they know about the dating scene are always people that are not single.
Right.
It's the people who are just making a judgment because they're in a different place in life. And we're just trying to, that's what we do here at Stories of Hope. We dismantle the myths. Like, no, that's actually not what's going on,
Right.
that maybe there's someone better. Maybe it is for someone, but it's not the generic rule at large. And it's just important that people know that.
Mm-hmm. But it was a fear of mine, so
Of course.
so that's why I think I was bold enough to say, like, these are the rules. And he was like, okay. And that also, I think, gave me the confidence to let my guard down, because if he's like going along with this, he's interested.
Mhm.
And I think the second time around, things went very quickly. I think we got engaged after 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So,
And we picked a rabbi who lived in Los Angeles.
and his
It was
wife.
also, and his wife. And that was good because, we
Why
would go
Los
out.
Angeles?
Well, we would go out. There was a rabbi I was close to.
Oh, okay.
He lived in Muncie, but then got a position.
And one of the things I said was, it has to be someone who's worked with a lot of couples. And this couple had worked and set up and coached a lot of couples.
Mm.
So,
And also when we would, you finish a date 11:30. Okay, it's 8:30 for them.
Actually, a pretty good idea.
So we could both speak to them, and they're not falling asleep with the phone. So
mhm.
And how did you have the grit when Amy was basically like shooting you down and saying, nah, I'm not interested, to be persistent and saying, no, but I really want to go out with you, instead
Right.
of swallowing your words and saying, like, okay, fine.
I really felt like there was a lot there. She was a really good person. I think that also her being a baalei teshuva, that was also part of it. I definitely felt at home with her,
Mm.
and a lot of her experience. So it didn't mirror mine exactly, but I think that was, it was a lot of what I was looking for.
And the second time around, like, it was so much fun, like every date, we didn't want to leave the date. People were like, you're going out too often. You're going on, your dates are too long. You're going to burn out. And we were like, we just wanted to like get to know each other more. And I felt like that was the best sign ever.
Mm. And what do you think was different? What do you think changed between the first time that you met and said no to the second time that you met and then said yes?
Well, I think, a lot of dating, it could be like working in an office. So sometimes when you start a new job, the first day, okay, you might become friends with someone the first day of the job, but that might not be the person you're friends with if you work there for 10 years.
Mhm.
You might say, oh, this person's weird. they like Batman or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? They like strange stuff. But whereas the people, once you get to know people, you warm up, whatever, you can say, okay, this person's really interesting. But so dating is a lot like that. So it's a highly charged atmosphere when you sit down with someone, or you work the full day, you go on a
Yeah.
date, you pick them up, then you drive to a restaurant. So you've had it, you no energy left, and it's 7:30, having dinner together, and so you're gonna like, oh, do you want to live in Israel? Whatever you like, even though the minefield topics you're trying not to touch on. Okay, it goes off, and okay. So, but if you just get to know people, like, oh, you see them around.
So it almost sounds like once it became less formal, it was able to be more natural. And when it was more natural, you were able to really develop a relationship.
I think so. But I think also having that in-between person, at least, I think for
I think
both
the
of
term
us.
is important.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, especially like if you've been dating for a while, you think like, I know what I want. I know what I'm looking for. I don't need someone. But I think when you're in it, you're so in it. You go from like, oh my gosh, this is the person I could spend the rest of my life with, to, oh my gosh, this is the person I could spend the rest of my life with. Like, there's so many ups and downs. Like, it's like an emotional roller coaster. And I think to have someone to help you process all those thoughts and feelings is really important. And for us, we had this great couple.
So I'll tell the story. Or?
Yes, go ahead, Yona and,
Okay.
and Rachel Buxton. I think we should give them a shout out. They were really instrumental in our dating. And I never met them until my Shabbos Kala, right?
Wow.
Yeah, they flew up from California, and he was our Masada
Aw.
Kedushin, and yeah.
So we got engaged, and Amy had a friend in Atlanta from her years there, or from college, who had an invitation business. So she went down there President's Day weekend to do all the invitations. And so you remember I had all these Shabbos meals, so I was inviting the whole planet to the chasana. And so she's going through all the invitations, and at the same time, so she told me to look at the website of the photographer,
that I wanted to use.
the guy from Atlanta.
So I sent it, right. And in those days,
We had dial-up internet, and I didn't have a cell phone yet. It's really a few years ago.
We're
that
aging
sounds
ourselves.
nice.
So she's trying to call me because she went through the invitation list, and she found a person who was like not one of my friends, but just a random person that was invited to the wedding. She's like, well, if this guy's coming, Eric's not friends with him, but he's just like, guy in the street. So who are all these other people?
And also, like, as baalei teshuva, we're planning our own wedding. We had a certain amount of money from each side. We're doing this ourselves. We were like trying to stay within a budget. And I'm like going through the invitations and I can't believe how many people are on his list. And I'm getting so frustrated because I'm calling him and I'm getting this busy signal while he's looking at the photographer. He was doing what I asked him to do. And I'm so frustrated. So I called Rabbi Bookstein and I said, told him how frustrated I was. And, this is so irresponsible and he's inviting so many people and we're not going to be able to afford the wedding. And he said to me, Amy, you are marrying a Baal Simcha. He waited so long to meet you. He waited so long to get married and he wants to share his Simcha with every single person he's ever met. Isn't that so beautiful? And he just turned the whole situation around. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And then he called Eric.
Are you crazy? You have to cut down your list. You're paying for this yourself. This is irresponsible. You can't live like this. You have to cut down your list immediately.
And by the time we spoke to each other,
we were both apologizing. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And it just, at that point, we realized how many other situations happened like that when we were dating. Things that we were so hyper-focused on, things that we thought were so important that now that we've been married 20 years, we're like, oh my gosh, that was so not important. And we were so focused on it. And it was really helpful to have an outside perspective, not just through the chuppah, but through the engagement, to have mentors that we trusted and that were really guiding us.
Yeah. I mean, mentors could be a game changer. And unfortunately, the wrong mentor could be a disaster, but the right mentor could be life-changing. And now you're in such a different place in your life. And well, actually, before we get there,
if you've ever wanted something more than anything in the world, then you've probably tried a segula or two. And if you're anything like me, then you've been dejected and disappointed when it seems like it didn't work. And that's why I love this organization called Better Than a Segula. Like their name, we learn on Simchas Torah, Ein Segula Ketorah. There is no better segula than Torah study. What this organization does is they have a group of Torah scholars that will learn something on your behalf in the zechus of what you want. And even better, the entire process is personalized. They can study a certain daf in the Gemara for 40 days, whatever you want, whatever speaks to your heart, whatever you connect to, you can let them know. So if this is something that you would find supportive, inspiring, and encouraging, you can contact them by either clicking the show notes below or take out your phone and call them at 732-364-7029. That's betterthanasegula.org, Better Than a Segula, an organization that's there to support you in the way that they know how to and in the way that they can. We'll be right back to our episode. But if you love to travel or you've always wanted to travel, then crank up the volume. I am seriously about to change your life. I just found out about this company called lalechet.org, whose mantra is the following: give us your wish list and we'll give you the world. This is a white glove service agency that takes care of everything when it comes to traveling from top to bottom. They're available 24/6. They'll take care of your airfare. They'll take care of your insurance. They'll take care of your itinerary. And get this, it won't just be done. It'll be perfect. And they offer two options. You can organize your own trip, whether you want an all-women's trip that you've always dreamed of, but just didn't know how to do, a family trip, a work trip. They can even charter a plane if you want something a little extra fancy and that just works for you. Or you can join one of their already curated trips. They have amazing trips that explore Jewish history with fancy meals. I mean, I don't know where this has been, but I know that this is a company I'll be using. So if you finally want the keys to the dreams that you've always had, but now you can finally make them reality, then check out lalechet.com to create that life that you no longer need to dream of, but can finally do. lalechet.com. They'll take care of all of it for you.
Eric, I just want to jump to you first and then I'll ask you the question, Amy. Do you know how many people you went out with?
No.
Okay. Was there ever a time when you felt really discouraged and thought I feel like I've met every person I've hosted so many meals. I've seen everyone that lives in the city. Who is it ever going to happen to me, or who is it ever going to be?
Listen, Hashem runs the world. And I definitely felt that was one of the reasons why I started having Shabbos meals, because I felt like, well, look, you could be like, I remember my uncle talked about his synagogue in California, not conservative synagogue. He said, there's a life cycle in synagogue. People are always interested in the synagogue really when their kids become bar mitzvah. Then they come in, they come out. And so I thought, what about the Lubavitch Rebbe? There are people he was a tremendous expert in education, educating thousands and hundreds of thousands of children, Jewish children. But he didn't wait till he had kids, never had kids. He could have said, well, when my kids are in school, then it'll interest me enough to be involved. So I said, well, maybe I'll never get married. I don't know. I'm not in control here. So my friend said, maybe we should make Shabbos meals. So we did.
Beautiful.
And I didn't do it every week. I did it every 3 weeks. But 1 week in, we made meals. 1 week in, we went out to families, and then one week we went out of Washington Heights. Mm-hmm. But and we saw 4 shidduchim from it. So
it's incredible. Yeah. So you didn't wait to get married to start to create the life you wanted.
Correct.
Which is really, really important. And what about you, Amy?
So I had dated before I became religious. When I moved to Atlanta, a lot of my friends were married. And so they were always trying to set me up on blind dates, and, similar to the shidduch system, except you know nothing about anyone. You just sort of like, oh, I met this guy and I thought maybe you would like him, and, go out. And I went out on like lots of blind dates. And I actually loved the shidduch system. I know that it's not perfect, but for me, coming from a world where like no one is honest about wanting to get married, you sort of have to suppress like that you actually are looking for a husband. No, I'm not looking for anything serious. You're, just having fun and going out on dates. And I didn't like that. I had a lot of, which is unusual. I had a lot of friends who got married right out of college, and I was looking for that. Like I wanted that family lifestyle. And I think that was one of the many things that attracted me to Orthodox Judaism. And, I didn't date that much. And then I went to Israel, and, it takes you a while to get settled before you like make the rounds and meet the shadchanim. So I was set up on a few dates, but nothing serious. And just when I was like getting more suggestions, I had to come home for something that was going on, and I really didn't want to. And my rabbis in Israel said, go home. For whatever reason, you're meant to go home now. You can always come back, and, it's only, in hindsight that we can see Yad Hashem, we can see the reason I had to go home, and the reason, I got to meet my husband, thank God, shortly after I arrived back. But I really had not had that much dating experience in the frum world. And I hadn't even been frum that long. Like I felt established. I felt like I was ready to get married. I felt, a strong sense of who I was. But that was definitely a concern when Eric and I were dating also. Like he had been frum much longer than me. I was a newer baal tshuva.
Well, so I have to interrupt. So I probably around 2000, I had been in New York like a year or two. I was in a restaurant, probably in Flatbush, and these breast offers would come in while you're eating, and they would try to give out these pamphlets, the different breast offer pamphlets. Mm-hmm. And so I remember I was on a subway platform, and I was reading this, You Are Not Alone, the pamphlet about shidduchim. And in the pamphlet, it says, maybe your shidduch isn't even from yet. And I remember... I said, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Of course she's from. I'm not going to wait. This is nonsense. And Lamaisa, I guess the reason why I was upset was because it was the truth.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We never know what God has in store, right. Ever, ever, ever. And sometimes we pretend to know. We like try to connect dots. And I guess it's comforting, but could also be harmful when the dots don't end up producing the picture that we thought they would.
Right.
So I feel like just trying to get a good laugh and appreciating that there's so much we don't know can actually be very comforting amongst the unknown. And now your parents, and I want to know what you've heard, if you've heard it much, about shidduchim as parents, what you've seen, and if there's anything that you would change. I know you haven't started with your children yet, right. But I think that would be a really interesting perspective to hear.
It's interesting because our children who are FFB are going to have totally different experiences than us. We were navigating it on our own without parents getting suggestions, checking things out. I think we're going to be much more involved. And, my husband has this famous line when someone calls us with a nachas call, like if a Rebbe calls or a teacher calls, he always says, we can't take all the credit and we can't take all the blame. Yeah. And I think that goes so much it just applies to so many other things, like in, this balance between emunah, that Hashem is going to take care of everything and he has it all orchestrated. And yeah, Baruch Hashem, we're grateful to be sitting here with you and looking back 21 years ago, that it all worked out so well. But we can only see that in hindsight. In the moment, you're balancing like, what does Hashem want from me? What am I supposed to do? What's my part? What's his part? How does this all come together? And so I think the same thing with our kids is that, we're going to have to sort of navigate it. It's going to be just like every first time parent who has a child in shidduchim, we're going to have to navigate it and figure it out and daven.
They're all individuals that I can tell you. They're all different.
We have 6 kids and it's amazing. They have the same parents and they're all very different. So yeah, and finding the right person for each of them. And we hope they'll have an easy time. We hope it'll be an enjoyable time. It won't be a terrible, like some people say like, oh, no one wants to be doing this, but maybe it'll be fun. They get to, go out and meet great people and hopefully find the right person that is going to be a good partner. I think a lot of times what makes dating so hard is that we're so, analytical of everything, and you have to be, because this is the person you're going to, not just is going to be your partner, but is going to be your co-parent. It's going to be your life partner. And so you have to be careful in what you're choosing and how you're choosing and how you're getting to know someone. But at the same time, you do have to, there's so much we didn't know about each other. We got engaged after 5 weeks and thank God it worked out. But like, there's so many things. Sometimes even at a Shabbos table, he'll be telling a story and I'll say, oh, I never knew that before. There's still things we're learning about each other 20 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think when we did the wedding together, a lot of it, because, we didn't have our parents involved. We knew we wanted a from wedding hall. And there were so many things, part of Jewish life that we knew just by being Orthodox Jews that our families didn't know. So, flowers, photographers, and the whole range of stuff, invitations. And so just the fact that, Amy and I managed doing that all ourselves. And it was really, all hands on deck. Okay, you're doing that. You're doing, we just, every day doing stuff, just trying to get us to the wedding. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I see, as parental role models that we provide for our kids, that's sort of what our married life looks like also. That, we're overwhelmed with life, but, it's like, just tag team. Okay, who's picking up so-and-so now? Okay, whoever's available. Mm-hmm. It's not like, anyone's turn or, women do this or men do that or, just, we're partners to a great extent. And I think, I see in our kids that I hope a little reflection of that growing up in a house like that.
That's really beautiful. I actually wanted to ask you, what are some lessons that you've learned together throughout your marriage that you'd like to share after 20 years of marriage that build a beautiful, harmonious relationship?
I'll go.
We just brought date night to the episode.
Right. I think one thing is that, of course, every couple argues, every couple has disagreements, but we don't have like major things that we let fester. Mm-hmm. Like we're both pretty like, we say what we think, we say what's bothering us, and then we move on. I wish you would have done X, or why didn't you do it this way? Or like, hopefully I say it in a nicer way. I hope I am more careful to do that. But I think that both of us are really like, we just let it go. Neither of us let it fester into something bigger than it is. It's hard when life is busy. We both work full time. We have a 6 kids. We host Shabbos meals. There's Baruch Hashem, we have a happy life. There's always a simcha or a yantif or something, and we're busy. And, sometimes when you're in that like routine and that day to day, it's hard to like pick yourself up and remember, I have to be like extra nice to my spouse. I have to be thoughtful. I have to be kind. I can't just say all the things I need done. I have to actually be nice about it. And so I think we're both very understanding of the pressures that both of us are under, balancing it all. And I think also that we really respect each other, like we're very, very different. We didn't talk about this in our dating, but that was something that I was very nervous about when we were dating. Eric was also, that our families are very, very, very different and they get along really well. That I'm very different from his family. He comes from, like he said, a very intellectual academic family. My family's like very fun and Hamish, and Eric is very formal. Like he wears a suit and tie every day because he had a mentor who inspired him to do that. And I like, when we're dating, I like imagine like him coming over and watching a football game with my dad and like wearing a suit and tie. And I was like, this is not going to work. But my dad and Eric were the best of friends. And that was really, they were the best of friends. He was so close with Eric. And it's just, to me, that was like so beautiful that was something I was so concerned about. And it wasn't something I needed to worry about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm hearing not making excuses to not be kind to one another because of stress, and being thoughtful that the other person should always have your best interest in mind, and communication, not using any excuse to say, well, we don't have time, so I'm not going to talk to you about this, because it doesn't feel good to talk about, because communication can be so scary and intimidating and uncomfortable.
Right.
Especially if we have to admit that we did something wrong.
Right. But I think also that mutual respect, like
And
even though
respect,
Eric
yes.
and I got off on a tangent and I said like how we were so different. But one of the things, Eric is like brilliant and so smart. He speaks a lot of languages. He's a historian. Like sometimes he's telling me things that I like, like my brain doesn't work like that. And sometimes I'm telling him things that his brain is like, what? Like, I guess probably all women do that and men are like, huh? But I think that we both overall like respect each other so much, and I think that that's what makes a really strong marriage is having that mutual respect.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Eric, anything you would add?
No, I can't think of anything. I know it's off topic, but the Dove and Debbie Greenblatt story. So the day after we got engaged, I was at a wedding, and I saw Dove Greenblatt at the wedding. So I went over to him and I told him, I said, I don't know if you remember me, in July, I was at this event in Flatbush, and you spoke about revisiting people on your list. And I said, last night I got engaged to someone, and it was part of the reason was I revisited my list. And I got engaged to the girl last night. He said, well, so thank you so much for coming over. This really makes my night. And okay, so fast forward maybe a year later, someone asked us to host them to give a share to single people in Washington Heights in our apartment. So
we were the only married couple in the apartment. It was filled with singles.
And we're in the back, and they do a tag team. Each one speaks, tells different stories to inspire people. And he told a story. He said, I was at a chasana about a year ago, or whatever, and a guy comes up to me. He said, I was at an event, and you told me to relook at the list, and I got engaged because of the advice you gave. I said, excuse me.
Really?
That was us.
Oh,
that was
wow.
the story. He was telling it, not realizing that we were the ones.
That's so funny.
The story was about.
It's it's really good advice. Like exploring the list. Like, is there anyone you'd reconsider? And I'll disclose something kind of funny. I heard that too before. And we're always trying to, something that's hard about someone that's single who hasn't been married before, even if someone has been married before, you have nothing to compare it to, that like you've never done it yet. So you're like, how do I know I did it right? And there could be a lot of doubt that can creep in, which can be very scary. And that's why it's so valuable to have someone to speak to. And I'm a very firm believer that if you're trying to do the right thing, God's not going to misguide you. And I heard this and I thought, okay, yeah, let me look at my list. And I looked at my list and I thought, you know what? At that time, that wasn't a good fit, but I feel like now it'd be a great fit. And I reached out to this guy. I was very nervous, and he was married, and it was so uncomfortable and embarrassing. Probably would have been a better idea to find someone that knew him, to be like a normal person and say, can you find out for me?
It's okay.
But I want to share the comic relief to anyone who's listening, who's thinking like, nah, or like, I've tried. Like, you're not alone, and these things happen, but then you feel the satisfaction of knowing you tried, you did your part. And it's always great to hear a new way of looking at things. Like, maybe at that time he wasn't a good fit, and maybe now he is, or she. And I think it's also very different when you make the choice than when someone tells you. Like, so many people had said, well, just give it a try, just give it a try. But when you say like, do I want to give it a try? It's a whole different relationship to the experience. And I'll just let that seed marinate in people's brains, because you never know where it can lead.
There was a couple that met at Eric's Shabbos meal I met them for the first time at our wedding, but you want to tell the story?
So I made a Shabbos meal, and people, friends bring friends, and this couple, they were both 31. They had gone out when they were both 19. I think first dates. She was one of 12 kids, and she had a lot of married siblings by the time she's 31. And they got engaged like 3 weeks later.
Wow. 10 years between their first date and their second date. And they were sitting across from each other at a meal.
And I don't think it's a question of like, oh, but like looking back, they should have gotten married then. Because I feel like people.
The timing had to be right.
Exactly. But that is really special. And it's so cool that it happened at your house. You said you made 4 matches from
those meals. Right. And we've been involved.
4 other ones.
Yeah, since then. We try, listen, we're not professionals, but we try. We like to host people. We just keep people in mind. Eric is always thinking on the way here, when we were driving here, he was like, what about so-and-so for so-and-so? Like, he's really always trying. He's not discouraged when people, are like, no, it's not what I'm looking for. No, he really like keeps people in mind.
I think they should go out anyway.
Yeah.
One of the reasons when I went out with people, even if it wasn't for me, I always try to set them up with my friends. I had plenty of single guy friends, and I didn't make shidduchim that way. But everyone always said it was in the ballpark. They saw what I saw. Okay, that wasn't a crazy idea. I wasn't setting them up with Dracula or anything like that. They say, okay, I see that. I see, okay, they went on a few dates or whatever.
Yeah.
But I felt like Hashem put me in a certain reason in a certain situation for a purpose, and okay, she's not for me, but how many guys, I knew from Or Sameach, from just being single, and you meet tons of people in life.
You have to think about your network and who you know, and you never know. You never know who you know that can know someone else. And
right.
We've had people at our Shabbos table. We had the girl and the guy. We didn't set them up, but other people made the match, and now they're our neighbors.
Right. Oh, that's so sweet. Right. So that leads me to my next question, which is, now you live in Passaic, right? And do you think that's a way that as a community we should encourage people to meet at Shabbos tables?
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, we always ask people, like, one time we had a bunch of single guys coming, and then girls called us and said, hey, we need a meal Friday night. We said, well, we're having guys, already. Are you comfortable? And we didn't think it was like they were different ages. It wasn't like it was a setup, but we said, are you comfortable? And they said, yeah, it's fine. And we said, we're not trying to set anyone up, but if, people are at the same meal, we want to just make sure everyone's comfortable. And then we asked the guys, and they were also okay with it. So we do make sure everyone's comfortable with it, but it is sometimes really nice to meet someone in just a more casual situation. On the other hand, sometimes it becomes too casual, and then you can't take the person seriously. Nah, I met them, just like what happened to us. Like, nah, it's not for me. You sort of have this, when I met Eric, like I was looking for someone who was really outgoing and dynamic, and it was like a late Shabbos in the summer, and he was like really quiet. He got up, he gave his Torah, he sat back down. I was like, no, not for me. And like, it's amazing because that's the way our brains work. We like want, problem solution. This is yes or no. It's not like sometimes we don't let it sort of develop enough. I mean, we're grateful that Hashem gave us another chance, and that we took that chance, and that we pursued it, and that it worked out, but it's not always so clear when you're in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is there anything that you're nervous about when your children start shidduchim?
The only thing I think about is that, you don't know what the future holds. So that's we've lived a good life, thank God. But there's so many things out there. So as from people, we try to limit. We keep guards at our gates, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But so that's the only thing that I'm concerned about. But I feel like just being from Jews, Orthodox Jews, just because we have such a great barometer for comparison. Looking at my friends who, never got married, were never interested in getting married. And, so I don't just like, it's not, keeping up with the Joneses or the Friedmans, or, I really have a comparison to, I remember I took my kids to Hoboken to go on the boardwalk, and I saw, some couple, with their dog. No kids, a trendy couple, wearing the, bicycle clothing, out for the jog with their dog. And I said, you know what? If I hadn't become religious, I told Amy's rabbi this, Rabbi Silverman, I said, that could have been me. If I hadn't made, I would say made the right choices in life. But it was like that French guy approached me in the dormitory. He said, hey, you're an American Jew. Like if he didn't have to come up to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you read like these stories in the Mishpacha or in Ami, and you're like, oh my gosh, is it really this bad? Is it really scary? Sometimes you hear, even on the podcast, like you hear some people who have had negative experiences. So like, you just hope your kids aren't going to have that. And you hope that they find people from good families and we're not so into, I think, I want them to find people who really have good qualities. Also for us as baalei teshuva, we were looking at just the person, not the family.
Yeah.
Because we both made choices to live a different life than our family. My mother actually became from, my brother's from, and so I mean, Baruch Hashem, we do have from family, but at the time they weren't yet. And, we were dating the person, not the family. And I think, it's different when your children are dating because you do look at, you're looking at young people when your children start dating. And so you're looking not just at the person, but at their family and how they were raised. And, and I'm sure sometimes that leads to people looking at the wrong things or how much money they have or how much, or white on white tablecloths. And you hear all these things. And I think, I daven that we're just going to find the right families and the right people. And we have wonderful kids. We're really, really great kids. In a couple of years, you can all give us a call because we have really terrific kids and we hope they'll find the right person.
Yeah. I think it's so important through media to always promote encouragement, hope, peace, new perspectives that lead to greater life enhancement. We are so good at voluntarily creating our own fear. We don't need help. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for driving in on this stormy, rainy night from Passaic. It has been such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for watching another episode of Stories of Hope featuring Amy and Eric. It was so much fun to talk to them. And I feel like we got some marriage advice. We got some insight. We got some new ideas on how things can continue to move in the Jewish community and try new things. And I love that because that's what we do here at SOH. We're just trying to take things that are good and make them better. Take things we don't have and just start bringing them up again. So if you want to let Amy and Eric know that you appreciate them taking the time out of their day to come and sit with me and share their life with you, then simply leave a comment in the comment section below. It means the world to our guests when they see what they've shared and how it's touched you. So instead of just taking, why don't you take a minute to just give back a little bit? And as always, if you know someone that should be featured on our podcast, if you have new ideas of what we should do with the Stories of Hope community, we are completing almost 1 year. That's pretty wild. And we just want to do more. And we just want to do better. And notice that I'm saying the words we, because you are a part of this. So please let me know, what else can we do to make this better? By emailing me at soh@meaningfulminute.org. If you've loved our content, I would so appreciate hearing. So you can also let me know by emailing me at soh@meaningfulminute.org. And if you weren't such a fan, I appreciate you giving me a chance for another week. And you can let me know why at soh@meaningfulminute.org. That's a joke. Please don't let me know if you're not such a fan. So thank you once again for being a part of our SOH family and helping us do this special, important work together. I'll see you next week.